Hi, everyone. I'm Monica. I'm a consultant with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Super happy to be here today to share some of the knowledge that we've gathered over the past couple months in hopes that it'll be helpful to you as you embark on Common Core implementation, which I know is fun. So I kind of wanted to dig into two things today, as Dr. Plank mentioned. These really centered around two pain points that we're seeing around the country, and they really converge around the same critical question, which is how do you get the right people around the table to help you as you embark on implementation? So when you're thinking about engaging stakeholders, messaging is absolutely key. So we will share some of our information about how best to communicate with the community and with the field about this. On the other side of things, as you're looking for on-the-ground partners in this work, you really need great technical assistance partners to help you with some of the work that you can't necessarily do in-house or could benefit from some help on. So to give you a little bit of context, the Foundation has partnered with a couple of funders across California to help the CAE with a communications grant to really help people statewide think about how do you communicate with people outside of education and within the education reform community about the changes that are coming with Common Core. So as part of this, we've done quite a bit of survey research, and I just wanted to share a couple of those results for you. We start with some very good news. When voters get descriptions of the Common Core, you'll kind of see the phrasing that was used there. An overwhelming number of them respond positively. So it is a message that, to your general voter who is absolutely not informed about anything, it's not a bad thing to open with. Even better news, for those who have actually been exposed to the Common Core at all throughout any of this, they do tend to think that the messaging that they have seen that isn't necessarily very targeted has actually made them respond favorably. So I know there's a lot of misconception out there, especially in terms of the conversation that goes on online, which is about 80% negative. There is actually very positive messaging out there that is working on voters, and this slide does demonstrate that. We also wanted to share just some of the messages that have been effective across the country as we've done some survey work. A lot of this seems very basic, but I think the big takeaway from this is actually that the most kind of simple messages that every day we assume as fact are the types of messages that resound with voters. So of course, leading with the Common Core prepares students for success in college and career. This slant towards post-secondary readiness is something that resonates with just about any stakeholder, and it really is a good thing to lead with. Teachers strongly support the standards. It's been a theme throughout conversations across the state that they really are the greatest partners here, and the success of the Common Core does hinge on them. That is something that is not lost on voters either. High expectations for all students ensure equal access to a quality education and a chance for all students to succeed. The equity and access message is really important to everyone, from school board members to members of the parent community. And so really emphasizing how this is going to be not just a lifting of standards, but also an equalizer is really great. And I'll leave you to read some of the rest of the messages here. I would also point out the last point about talking about how the Common Core is already working. I know that this isn't necessarily applicable to everyone, but in the instances where you have examples of buildings in your district or other states that you have seen have best practices, it's really powerful to tell people about those great stories and let them know how people are already being successful and motivating others to move towards the same goal. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about teachers. They really are the most important voices in this conversation, not just as recipients of the messaging and targets of the messaging, but also as your messengers. So you have wonderful teachers in your district who are pretty well informed about the Common Core and whose opinions are extremely well respected by everyone from parents, other administrators, to people who are a little bit farther removed from the conversation, such as those taxpayer individuals in your community who don't currently have school-age children. And so I wanted to show some information about this, about how knowledge of the Common Core is pretty much universal around teachers, but not so much around voters. So you see a really great opportunity here for you to use your teachers as vessels for really communicating with the rest of the community that does not have the kind of knowledge about the Common Core that we need right now to be successful. We've also have a lot of survey data showing that parents are particularly concerned about whether teachers have the support that they need to be able to implement Common Core. So an example of how you might be able to put this into practice is to provide very concrete information about the kind and quality of teacher training that you're providing, and have teachers be the ones to deliver that information. And that would really help to alleviate some parent concerns, for example. So these are just some of the messages that we've seen are working nationally. Obviously, it's a lot more complicated than that. I would also point out that some of the process-oriented messages that we find to be very compelling within the education reform community, things about how the Common Core standards were passed, who's working on it, how they've been adopted in different states. Those are not necessarily the kinds of messages that resonate with folks outside of this circle. So it's really important just to kind of reorient around who exactly is receiving these messages and how much background they have. When you look internally, a lot of systems are relying very heavily on technical assistance partners to help them make this transition. It's not an easy one, and there are a lot of people out there willing to help. And so for this purpose, the foundation has really invested quite heavily in developing a taxonomy, or simply just a framework for helping districts and states really think about, first of all, what type of technical assistance they may need, and second of all, who are the people that are going to be able to help them do this. So I want to just help you understand how we're thinking about technical assistance, and we really welcome a lot of feedback around this as well if this doesn't seem to resonate with what you're looking for in a partner. First of all, technical assistance really needs to be customized to the local context. So if you see kind of technical assistance against the other universe of services and products out there, technical assistance isn't a product, it's a service at the end of the day. It's not really something that a vendor sells you. And I know that a lot of districts across the state are getting bombarded with people offering products and services with gold seals on them. And that is not the definition of a technical assistance partner. It's definitely more than that. It also really needs to actively build the ability of your local team to drive the work on your own. So really anything that's just advocacy or knowledge sharing or convening doesn't necessarily count as the kind of assistance you might need. And building off of that, technical assistance needs to have the expectation of being temporary. There is no expectation of having a partner come in and replace your core capacity as a district to do what you do best. So this is really people kind of coming along to help give you a kickstart where extra capacity is needed or where some expertise exists. We, from this, developed 6 different types of technical assistance that we think that most providers do fall under. So I'll go over them pretty quickly. There is design and implementation planning. This is really just around strategy development for Common Core. That might be really thinking through how is your district going to serve to assist individual schools and buildings around Common Core implementation. What is the process around that? It's very high level, and this is really the point where a lot of stakeholder engagement happens, and a lot of the time some outside help is good there. On the policy development side, this is mostly relevant to states but also to districts, so really adjusting any board adopted policies you might have around school accountability and support to align better with the Common Core. Tool and resource development is a huge one. This is really digging a little bit deeper, having people help develop actual performance tasks and frameworks for developing units and lessons that are aligned to the Common Core. There are a really big number of providers focused on this, some quality and some not so much. Training and coaching really go hand in hand. This is really about knowledge dissemination and capacity building for the staff in your district district as well as community members who may be relevant. On the training side, this is really group knowledge transfer, talking about helping stakeholders understand the kinds of instructional shifts that are going to be required of them at the building level and at the district level. On the coaching side, that's really drilling down to the classroom level, individual teachers really understanding how this is going to affect their classroom practice, how they can use formative assessments to better inform how they're working. And implementation project management, I think, is the most operational of these. This is really, now that you have this great plan and all of these wonderful partners to bear, how do you manage this against your timeline and your budget and your other strategic priorities? So after we developed this taxonomy, we really wanted to see how we might be able to actually apply this to the field. And so we did a survey of about 90 state and district leaders across the country and asked them a couple key questions about how they're using technical assistance and what their needs are. So of course we wanted to know, for example, which types of service do states and districts most frequently use? And going back to this, we're seeing a lot of work on design and implementation planning, a lot of reliance on tool and resource development, and also a lot of use of training. About 80% of the folks that we interviewed said that they are actually using an outside provider for training, in contrast with only about percent for coaching. So you'll kind of see a slant towards the types of services that are very customized and very specific to your district, those being done more in-house, and the types that are a little bit more high-level being outsourced. We also really wanted to explore, what the geographic spread of technical assistance providers were. Were you looking for local providers who really understand context, or perhaps national organizations that really have a bigger presence and track record? And so we're seeing quite a large use of technical assistance support from these national organizations, with about 40% of technical assistance being provided by these. But you'll also note that there are a lot of cases of districts and states contracting directly with individuals who are providing expertise as well. But I definitely don't want, the heavy use of national providers to give anyone the impression that there are, technical assistance providers out there that have been working for everyone and that everyone is using. You'll see that the landscape is actually extremely fragmented, and you'll see, I know that it's very hard to see some of the names there, but there are some very recognizable organizations out there, including publishers and your standard R&D firms. But there's also a huge panoply of providers out there who aren't necessarily recognized in the field, but are providing good services to individual districts and states. You'll also see that state departments of education are being relied on pretty heavily. And so, here CDE obviously is doing a lot of work to try to be supportive, and I think that's being reflected across the country as well. This is just a very quick overview of the kinds and really range of technical assistance providers that we saw as we surveyed folks across the country. And I know it's kind of hard to see up here. We're definitely happy to provide these lists to you if you're interested. But you'll see that there's really a large number of people that are being utilized, and some types of technical assistance that are particularly crowded. So tool and resource development, I think that there were more providers than the ones that are listed here, but really a huge range of folks providing help. And on the implementation project management side, there's not a lot of activity going on there. We're not exactly clear whether that is because the need for it is not humongous, or whether because the supply is actually not that great. So I wanted to provide an example of what this taxonomy actually looks like for a single site. So we took the case of Colorado implementing Common Core and really asked them, who are you working with, who do you find effective, and what exactly are they doing for you? So I wanted to point out two things about this. First of all, they have a good number of partners who have been assisting them with this effort. They also have a couple of partners who have been helping them across different types of technical assistance. So the synergies here are pretty obvious. They have 4 providers providing both training and coaching, and it obviously makes sense that these providers would actually be able to have expertise in both of these areas. But you would, I think, find it very rare that a technical assistance provider is equally effective across all types. So when you do see a provider that says, we are going to manage all of Common Core for you, and it's going to be great, beware. You'll also see under policy development that there was no external technical assistance provider there. And this really converges on a question that a lot of states and districts have been telling us about, which is, that they have needed to do a very deep needs and readiness assessment internally to see what is it actually that they really do need help with, what is actually really their core capability that they as a district can do much better than any outside provider. And for Colorado, they really thought that policy for them was a strong suit and that they didn't necessarily need a lot of help with that. The last piece of this is really just thinking about how we can use this taxonomy, not just to map out who is already being used in the space, but how you can go about making decisions on how to select partners and how to evaluate them. Because right now, I think the timing is very interesting. Everyone is sort of, in that decision-making mode, not having completely selected who you're going to partner with here. And hopefully this will be useful. So for those states that have already partnered with other districts, they have, I think, 3 qualities that they really found very useful. So of course, they need these partners to actually come to the table with knowledge and expertise. And I've heard today that, no one really does have a complete best practice solution in the field right now because we're all in the same boat implementing Common Core. But it is really great to talk to some providers who have actually worked with other states, at least done this once or twice, or have the kind of perspective to really understand what people around the country are doing. Offering a comprehensive array of services and customizing them to local needs. The willingness of a provider to really see your district as its own and to really see your unique needs is absolutely critical as well. If you have a provider coming in saying that they have kind of an off-the-shelf solution that worked for a district in Colorado and they're now going to replicate that for you, that's not necessarily going to serve you well because you do know your kids and your teachers best. The last piece is, having collaborative team players that are really responsive to feedback and circumstances. All of this is a very evolving process, and you really need a partner that's willing to move and be flexible with you on this. So I think the conclusion on this is that, you select a technical assistance partner the same way that you select a really great colleague for your district office, and they really need to have the same qualities there. This is really another way to represent the organizational fit of each type of technical assistance. So we have 3 domains here that you can think about. On the expertise side, does the partner have a really highly specialized domain focus? What is it that they're bringing to the table that you don't currently have on your district team? For some of the national organizations, do they have a best practice solution where this has worked in another state or is working in another district? And can they tell you why it's working? And can they figure out how to make it work for you as well? On the resource side of things, you obviously need a lot of talent on the provider side, but you also really need to look at whether this provider actually has the ability to flex its resources in a way to accommodate you. Your timelines are tight, money is tight as well, and having a provider that's able to actually meet those needs it is really good. And that's been a problem with a lot of the regional providers, is not being able to actually flex to that extent, and that's where some of the national providers have had an edge. On the sustainability side, this is super basic about partners' ability to institutionalize, to exist in 2 years when you are still implementing Common Core and actually need them to be there. So these are just some of the things that you can think about as you look at technical assistance providers. And I would note that these criteria are not necessarily uniformly important across different types of technical assistance. For example, for coaching and training, you don't necessarily need a provider that has the ability to serve hundreds and thousands of kids if that's not the size of your district. So it's definitely something that we hope is a framework that you'll be able to work with, but that is definitely customizable. So with that, I really hope that this taxonomy is beginning to be helpful to folks as they start to think about how you develop partnerships in this space. A lot of our work on this is not going to be done until probably March, but we're hoping that we can share the outputs with you as we have them, and that we'll actually be able to put some very concrete lists of partners to distribute to you all to consider. So, thank you.